The year, the Trade and Investment Convention, TIC, happening July 9th to 11th at the Center of Excellence, Macoya. Doors open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on business days, July 9th and 10th, and 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Consumer Day, Saturday, July 11th. A business dress code is in effect on business days. Park and ride services will be available from Constantine Park and the UETGR North Car Park on all 3 days, with additional service from NAMDevco on July 9th and 11th. Register online at www.ttma.com/tick and attend free. The deadline for free registration is Wednesday, July 8th. After that, admission is $50 at the door. The Trade and Investment Convention is proudly sponsored by the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Tourism, Exim Bank, Ballroops Group, and Robust Security Network Limited. Don't miss Trinidad and Tobago's premier business networking and investment event. We look forward to seeing you at TIC.
Get ready for Generations of Steel, the sweetest pan show bar none.
Featuring Desperados,
Shell Invaders,
Massey Trinidad All-Stars,
First Citizen Supernovas,
and the pride of the South, Fun Clear. Plus their talented youth bands. Saturday, July 11th.
at the iconic Grandstand, Queen's Park, Savannah.
Showtime, 6 p.m. till 10:30 p.m.
All performing their most exciting and multifaceted repertoire. Coolers allowed.
Early bird tickets.
2 persons on 1 ticket for only $350.
The quadraphonic tickets admits 4 persons for only $600.
The single pan tickets cost only $200.
By public demand, early bird tickets remain till Saturday, 4th July.
Additional $10 off for online purchases.
Children 12 and under, accompanied by an adult. Admission is free. Get yours now. Available at islandetickets.com.
At Crosby St. James,
All Kenny Sports.
All Extra Foods Supermarket,
Westby, Tagarigua, Athletes by the Park.
Jumbo Foods Baratari,
Gag Electrical, opposite Starlight. Tigger Martin, Main Road. Tarp Office, Belmont. Mirage Westside Supermarket. Arima. Anderson Fashion, opposite Citygate. Western Union, Tuna Puna, and all participating bands. Presented by Super Panman, Dane Gulston and Friends.
Supported by CCNTV6, The Express Newspaper, and I-95.5 FM.
For more info, call 732-3402.
WESN.
Good morning, yes, this is Talking About the WSN, the Connecticut show. Michael Smaller here, once again joining you. We apologize, but the show must go on, and let's get straight to it because we should be having Karen Shishera shortly to speak about another important matter. But before that, I wanted to make some, as I usually do, some observations. One of the things with regards to the tragedy in Venezuela that we should not ignore is the fact that it was a natural disaster that was much closer to home than we're used to, and given the environmental conditions upon which our small little twin island republic is based on, it is not impossible that it could happen here. So this is a situation where our response, of course, it's in line with that philosophy I was speaking about yesterday, how you treat the most vulnerable. Well, it's also how you treat people in need, how you treat your neighbor. Because, you know, there's that basic old saying, do unto others as you would like to be done to you. So one of the things is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he is looking to say we should be coming together, right? They had a ceremony with the Venezuelan embassy saying, as we lay this wreath, let it be more than a symbol of mourning, let it be a symbol of friendship, solidarity, and hope, which again, that should have been the whole point of any communications this country had with Venezuela to try to potentially use this as a means to move past whatever minor personal bad blood they have with the people in office and get down to the business of two countries looking to conduct trade, to conduct any sort of mutually beneficial economic activity. So, Minister Sobers went on to say, in moments of sorrow, neighbors must stand together. Now, this is the right thing to say on multiple levels, because I would argue it is messages like this that also are important to one's domestic situation. One of the things that allows America to have such a patriotic population who will respond when things are important is the constant amount of reinforcement behind a lot of the messaging and symbolisms of coming together. In fact, it's why certain political ideologies are so insidious, because in one breath, you're saying that America is a horrible country while advocating for the rights of people to migrate there. Technically, it makes no sense, but no one ever accused certain ideologies of actually being intelligent. That said, I find it interesting that Minister Sobers is looking to try to build bridges with a foreign government and a foreign nation, when you could argue that locally there are signs that should be concerning of potential fracturing with regards to whether it is the trust and confidence in our economy and society as a place to do business, or the trust and confidence in society as so far that we maintain social contracts between each other for the sake of each other. Social contracts that says we're not going to necessarily take advantage or try to harm each other. Or we could speak about the political unity or lack thereof. So, first off, one of the things that let's go to the big observation of it and work our way down. There is a story in The Guardian, I think it might have been coming from Sunday, speaking about the various death threats throughout the years. It's not as though Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar is the only one to ever have security concerns of that manner. But one could argue that we have never necessarily seen anything quite on this level. Now, maybe it has happened, and it just was never reported. Maybe it was covered up by previous administrations, previous governments, maybe even the partnership itself when it was in power. But beyond the fact that it seems as though this government has had 3 to 4 separate individual threats against it. Separate and individual threats. There was the initial syndicate conversation, which may or may not have included gangsters from Sangre Grande, right? Then there was the situation where you had a threat one random Friday from a man in Belmont that was cause for concern, just not enough of a concern to do the Red House staff the courtesy of warning them that MPs might be targeted when MPs are essentially in the building. Then, of course, there was whatever the threat was to justify the new state of emergency, the new state of emergency. And then, of course, there is the current high-profile case with a prominent businessman who has apparently, there's intelligence to say that he said some things. And he's not the first person to say some things, but he is potentially the first person to say some things in the current environment, and for it to be taken so seriously, because I guess the litmus test is not actually intent, just financial means. The litmus test is not past behavior, but rather just the potential, no matter how small. Of course, maybe they have more intelligence, but then if that's the case, I have a hard time having confidence in that, because you probably should be detaining more people if there's a full-blown conspiracy. Anyway, the point is, we have all of that, but then there's also the situation in Tobago with WASA, where the Chief Secretary said that it was, well, I believe he said it was terrorism, or it could be terrorism, I'm not saying it is, but at the very least, it is a situation where you cannot necessarily be considered irresponsible for considering it. Now, apparently, there's the Minister of Energy saying there have been 92 acts of sabotage in the oil sector since October. Not since the election, since October. Now, again, I don't know how many acts of sabotage we normally get per month, per week, per year, but the question I have is why? Why does it seem that anything that can go wrong is going wrong? The thing is, we do have to account for this very simple fact. When a new government comes into power, we assume that there are certain degrees and amounts of corruption throughout the public service, right? We know that when we get union leaders who are worth their salt, who actually have anything worthy of national conversation, they will speak about the issues that the entity has with regards to those employees of the entity whose workers they should be representing, don't actually put any hours, put any work. Now, most union leaders are not brave enough or don't have the foresight to speak about these things. They are more short-sighted of, I don't want to rock the boat. But the fact of the matter is, many of our public entities, from utilities to service providers like the health sector, public health sector, to even the police, because, hey, listen, the commissioner, if you agree with his firing of those 70 officers, the fact of the matter is that is an admission that you do have problem officers. It's not just the public saying that they're there and pointing to incidents. The commissioner has now admitted it, that he has to clean up the service. We could debate on the effectiveness of it, but the fact remains, name me one public entity that is in a healthy position where everything is fine. Contrary to the government's political agenda, it's not WASA. Their own appointments didn't work out. Just saying. But why does it seem as though the disruptions are not just a response? Because when you are actually trying to deal with these situations, not everybody's going to be happy. So you're going to get some negative blowback, some negative responses. People who want to fight the changes, want to try to prevent them if possible, or want to lash out if they can't. But can that account for everything that seemingly is going wrong? And we're not talking going wrong as though, well, the price of gas, dropped like a rock, and that's why we have revenue problems. We're talking about, again, acts of sabotage. Whether it is the oil and gas sector, whether it is WASA's equipment in Tobago, during a vacation period, when you have a water shortage, right? What else could go wrong? Because the thought was the death threats were in response to the government maybe doing something to anger the gangsters, right? But it seems as though as more and more time goes on, more and more people are angry. Now the question is, are they angry because the government is trying to make changes for the better? Or are they just angry that the government is making bad changes? Now, as much as my usual context and commentary will imply a certain direction, now is where you have to be careful. Assumption in a case like this is not necessarily useful. But the question remains, why does it seem as though things are falling apart? Is it that some of the changes being made are too aggressive? And let's not forget, they make certain changes, and we'll talk about it coming up with Karen, with regards to certain entities where it seems as though they want to get rid of them without any kind of plan or structure to compensate for their absence. To what extent are then, you could say, the changes the government is making, generally speaking, half-baked at best, ill-informed at worst, and by ill-informed, rather ineffective and potentially harmful? I mean, it's not just the fact that you could look at the news and see things that shouldn't be happening, like things like sabotage. It's one thing to say, oh, PTSD maintenance could never get that right. Some degree of neglect there. It's one thing to say something like that. It's another thing to say, oh, acts of sabotage. That's what the minister's claiming. I don't even necessarily need to read what the acts of sabotage are. He's claiming that they are acts of sabotage. How am I supposed to perceive that? Why is it that there is such a negative response? Why is it that there are people who are so willing, apparently, allegedly, to harm the systems of our society in such a way? Has this happened before to this degree? More? Less? We don't know. What's the context? Now, and of course, one of the things that has been happening for years now, so to be fair, it's not necessarily with this government, is with regards to things like fiber optic line, telephone, copper line, etc., etc. And electrical wire, which we have seen, some people have seen that one video a couple of weeks ago where someone, you know, he played stupid games and he got stupid prizes. But the situation is also concerning in that now there is something that to me in my lifetime is unprecedented. I don't remember anything like this ever happening, where Nestle Trinidad and Tobago is potentially looking to sell their factory. Now, they don't necessarily want the factory to close. They say that the preferred outcome is for someone to buy the factory and to keep operating it, but for some reason, they don't want to operate it any longer. And the question to that is why? The union, the OWTU apparently represents the workers, and they are speaking with regards to the process and what parts of the process is Nestle TNT maybe not telling the union, have they informed the government, etc., etc. And how will Nestle ensure, if they are in good faith trying to keep the factory open with a new owner in order to preserve the jobs, how will they ensure that happen? There's a lot of questions here. But the fact of the matter is, Minister Tanku, if this was a place where investors saw great opportunity, why is it that one entity seemingly is looking to downsize its commercial activities that it's directly responsible for? I believe they might still own the distribution rights, maybe the branding rights, and essentially they will be contracting or outsourcing the manufacturing. But still, you don't necessarily grow your business by making a move like this. This is a way to reduce your footprint. This is a way to reduce your risk. Is it that they view TNT as a land of great risk? It doesn't help that the innocent until proven guilty seemingly is going out the window. You don't necessarily, we have not heard that the Hadiths have been charged, but already the state airline has dropped their product, but not other businesses. And the fact of the matter is, usually when things like this happen, the justification is, well, the public is not going to buy the product because there's significant public backlash, so I need to drop the product. Except one, you're an airline. People aren't going to pick your airline based on the water that you serve. And two, other establishments apparently are continuing to sell Blue Waters without a problem. So how does that look now? How does that look? Because it makes things comes across very political. And if you want to speak about truth, justice, and the Trinbagonian way, the last thing the population is going to care about is any sort of political agenda. And speaking about politics, there's also a situation in the opposition where that has not been resolved, and certain senior people are looking at various situations that they are concerned are not being addressed. And I only bring that up to then bring my entire point to conclusion, because I started off, oh, let's not forget the whole situation with CARICOM. Yeah, we're like this, Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM. Minister Soba spoke about unity. It only took, I don't know how long, for somebody in this government to actually start the right type of messaging towards Venezuela in order to get the ball rolling, to mend fences, and get our business relationship, our professional relationship back on track. We couldn't even do that when the moment demanded it. We were late to the party. But dare I say, coming together in this country, if you want to say that about our relationship to to a neighboring nation, what about within? What about within? Because dare I say, even the UNC has some shatter points, some fractures. We just can't see it, we just don't know it. But more importantly, it doesn't seem as though we're coming together. It seems as though this is an every man for themselves situation right now. That's what happens when rats try to escape a sinking ship. Is the ship sinking and we're just not aware? Now, it might not be sinking very fast. It might be very slowly. Snail's pace. Which then means that we have more than enough time to address the situation if we're willing to address it. If we're willing to be upfront and truthful about it. If we're willing to not just assume that our pride is too important to give up. But, and I'll end with this. While some of the most humble, servant-oriented people in TNT are going to be in the public sector, are going to be police officers, and dare I say, I assume that if you look hard enough, you might find a politician who's going to be humble, who's going to be about serving the people first, and their ambitions are a distant second. But the flip side to that is people in public life in TNT, from certain areas of the public service, to the politicians, to even police officers, are some of the most arrogant, self-serving, self-centered individuals in the society, even more than some businessmen and women. It's a hell of a thing. You assume the rich would be the most arrogant. Trust me, as someone who has been in customer service. But more importantly, we all have heard stories. I don't know why we don't necessarily look to put everything together when we do our analysis. And if it is a case where we do not have a public sector, important service providers, to be oriented around being humble and doing the job properly, dare I say, that then is an example for the rest of the country to again. It's every man for themselves, boys. Whether the ship is sinking or prospering, we're not going to be doing it together. That almost was, in some ways, Trinidad and Tobago. At one point, the fear was it was going to be Trinidad and Tobago. Two islands, essentially not one country. Let's end it there. Hopefully, Karen should be here and we'll get into the topic quick. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Get ready for Generations of Steel, the sweetest pan show bar none.
Featuring Desperados,
Shell Invaders,
Massey Trinidad All-Stars,
First Citizen Supernovas,
and the pride of the South, Funclair. Plus their talented youth bands. Saturday, July 11th.
at the iconic Grandstand, Queen's Park, Savannah.
Showtime, 6 p.m. till 10:30 p.m.
All performing their most exciting and multifaceted repertoire. Coolers allowed.
Early bird ticket.
2 persons on 1 ticket for only $350.
The quadraphonic tickets admits 4 persons for only $600.
The single pan tickets cost only $200.
By public demand, early bird tickets remain till Saturday, 4th July.
Additional $10 off for online purchases.
Children 12 and under, accompanied by an adult. Admission is free. Get yours now. Available at ICNTT.com.
At Crosby St. James.
All Kenny Sports.
All Extra Foods Supermarket.
Westby, Tagarigua, Athletes by the Park.
Jumbo Foods Barataria.
GAC Electrical, opposite Starlight. Digger Martin Main Road. Tarp Office, Belmont. Mirage Westside Supermarket. Arima. Anderson Fashion, opposite Citygate. Citygate, Western Union, Tunapuna, and all participating bands. Presented by Super Panman, Dane Gulston and Friends.
Supported by CCNTV6, The Express Newspaper, and I-95.5 FM.
For more info, call 732-3402.
Get ready for the biggest business-to-business event of the year, the Trade and Investment Convention, TIC, happening July 9th to 11th at the Center of Excellence, Mokoya. Doors open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on business days, July 9th and 10th, and 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Consumer Day, Saturday, July 11th. A business dress code is in effect on business days. Park and ride services will be available from Constantine Park and the UETGR North Car Park on all 3 days, with additional service from NAMDevco on July 9th and 11th. Register online at www.ttma.com/tick and attend free. The deadline for free registration is Wednesday, July 8th. After that, admission is $50 at the door. The Trade and Investment Convention is proudly sponsored by the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Tourism, Exim Bank, Ballroops Group, and Robust Security Network Limited. Don't miss Trinidad and Tobago's premier business networking and investment event. We look forward to seeing you at TIC.
Something very important, there is an intrinsic neurotrophic factor that is released through myokines, that is some peptides that we have in our muscle that produce neuromodulation and increase that peptide in the brain to increase the neurocognitive of the brain.
I'm glad you said that, right. So exercise has an important part to play in the aging brain. As we get older, our gray matter does shrink, we have reduction of synapses, but exercise is shown to actually improve our cognitive functioning.
Totally.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
Get ready for the biggest business-to-business event of the year, the Trade and Investment Convention, TIC, happening July 9th to 11th at the Center of Excellence, Macoya. Doors open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on business days, July 9th and 10th, and 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Consumer Day, Saturday, July 11th. A business dress code is in effect on business days. Park and ride services will be available from Constantine Park and the UETGR North Car Park on all 3 days, with additional service from NAMDevco on July 9th and 11th. Register online at www.ttma.com/tick and attend free. The deadline for free registration is Wednesday, July 8th. After that, admission is $50 at the door. The Trade and Investment Convention is proudly sponsored by the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Tourism, Exim Bank, Ballroops Group, and Robust Security Network Limited. Don't miss Trinidad and Tobago's premier business networking and investment event. We look forward to seeing you at TIC.
Get ready for Generations of Steel, the sweetest pan show bar none.
Featuring Desperados,
Shell Invaders,
Massey Trinidad All-Stars,
First Citizens Supernovas,
and the pride of the South, Fun Claire. Plus their talented youth bands. Saturday, July 11th.
at the iconic Grandstand, Queen's Park, Savannah.
Showtime, 6 p.m. till 10:30 p.m.
All performing their most exciting and multifaceted repertoire. Coolers allowed.
Early bird tickets.
2 persons on 1 ticket for only $350.
The quadrophonic tickets admits 4 persons for only $600.
The single pan tickets cost only $200.
By public demand, early bird tickets remain till Saturday, 4th July.
Additional $10 off for online purchases.
Children 12 and under, accompanied by an adult. Admission is free. Get yours now. Available at ICNTT.com.
At Crosby St. James,
All Kenny Sports,
All Extra Foods Supermarket,
Westby, Tagarigua, Athletes by the Park,
Jumbo Foods Baratari,
Yak Electrical, opposite Starlight, Tigger Martin Main Road, Tarp Office, Belmont, Mirage Westside Supermarket, Arima, Anderson Fashion, opposite Citygate, Western Union, Tuna Puna, and all participating bands. Presented by Super Pan Man, Dane Gulston and Friends.
Supported by CCNTV6, The Express Newspaper, and I-95.5 FM.
For more info, call 732-3402.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
I'm back and talk about the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small joined by, yes, we're pressed for time, so she's looking at the pace. Joined by the one and only former Minister of Finance, Karen Nishera. Karen, welcome to Talking Points.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here as usual.
And I was speaking before you came on about the fact that it seems like a lot of things are going wrong in ways that I'm not accustomed to seeing. I'm not accustomed to so many threats against the government and acts of sabotage and acts of terrorism, allegedly, right? Most of these things we don't know. But one of the things we do know is the government has been shutting down certain programs. Now, in some cases, on the surface, we're not quarreling the fact that they dealt with it, but we're questioning the manner of which they dealt with it. But in other situations now, the explanation didn't fully track for me, and I think it didn't fully track for you. And we're speaking about the recent situation, I believe it was last week, with regards to MyLat.
Correct, yes. And I think the reason why it has resonated with me so much is that I am an educator, and education plays an important part in my own training, and also opportunity which the legal education provided to so many people in Trinidad and Tobago who otherwise could not afford to go to the United Kingdom and study law, pay tuition fees, and setting up our own indigenous legal education system open up the opportunity where originally many of us were called locally assembled, but those locally assembled lawyers became the attorneys, senior counsel, king's counsel, queen's counsel, whatever you call them, judges, and legal luminaries. So I guess this is an area which I have a particular interest in as an educator myself. So MILAT, the MILAT program, as we, as Sean indicated, I think Minister Wayne Sturge announced sometime earlier this month that they were going to suspend it temporarily. What that means, I'm not quite sure, but he used the term suspend temporarily. And I believe he said at the end of July that they would look at some sort of review. I don't think it sat well with people. It certainly did not sit well with me, because the rationale he gave for the suspension did not seem to line up or align with the facts, and that therein lies the problem, because it then brings to what is the real reason, or so it seems, for shutting down a program which is part of your education budget, your budget for allocation for education. Was a decision made based on where we have to reduce the fiscal deficit, reduce our expenditure, and what program can be shut down? And it seems so much like that. And why? Because the reason he gave, according to the report, is that he said that they were closing it down or suspending it, and not using the word close down, suspending it temporarily in order to do a structural and financial review looking at the economic viability of the program. And so when we look at and yet, when we look at the reasoning, what we do know is that in the 2024-2025 fiscal budget, the allocation for MILAT in particular was 27.4 million. In this last year's estimates of expenditure, it has been reduced to 18.7 million. You've got a 1/3 cut in the budgetary allocation to the MILAT program. So it makes you wonder, is it going to be as temporary as the minister says? And in fact, is it not looking as though you're looking at a dollars and cents issue? And I just want, before I move on to what MILAT is, because we have to look at the argument that he put forward. And the argument is not only apparently not supported, certainly by data, but it's actually counter. It does not support what he's saying. In fact, the opposite is true. If he were looking at the data that was available, he would be saying we need to expand MILAT. MILAT is a really great success, and it is going from strength to strength. And we, as the government, should both for the national objectives as well as the individual objectives, we should, and the data that we have, we should expand that program rather than looking at suspending it. And when we look at the cohort, and it's not me that's saying that, it is a report from the United Nations Development Program. They report as who is the most affected. When you look at it, it does not seem to, it flies in the face of not only common sense, but what a government should be doing. So let us start first by the arguments of economic viability, which I mentioned. The reason why I mentioned that in particular, because if you're saying you're looking at whether it's economically viable, I think that's the words that the minister used, then you're not looking just at counting the dollars and cents, but you're looking at value for money. You're looking at whether the spend on the program is giving you the results or giving you back the objectives of the program. Has it fulfilled those objectives? If it has fulfilled those objectives, you have gotten a good return on investment, you have gotten value for money, and therefore the economic viability of the program is clearly tied not to how much money you spent, but if that money was well spent, if that money gave you the results that you're looking for. So before we look at to see whether that is in fact so, let's look at briefly at what is MILAT and some of the issues that would have arisen, in particular urban poverty, which is tied into who are the persons most affected by this decision. So first of all, they say that MILAT is a 2-year program that was a residential program. It was established in 2007, and it was established for youth at risk. That is critical. And when they say youth at risk, those are actually students who are at the verge of being expelled from schools. So you're not talking about students who are the middle of the road students. We're not talking about the students who are going to the so-called prestige schools where academic excellence is what they're known for. We are talking about students who are at most at risk of being expelled from the system. And so it allows them to obtain that objective of the MILAT program, which is a military-led academic training program that is supported by the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, very much like United Kingdom and United States that have similar programs. I think in the United States it's called Challenge USA, and the National Guard is responsible for the program. So the same concept. So in terms of, and the focus is on education. That is to have students, there's vocational training, definitely part of it. There's character building, mentorship, and all of that is part and parcel of the program. But you are doing all of that in order to permit students who had either no CXC subjects at all or had one or two to gain a full certification. So it's very much education focused, and it's at students who are at risk and who have not performed well in the school environment. So those are not your average student. These are students who are really very, very, very challenged. So the uphill climb is even higher. So what does it say about MILAT? Well, as I said, it's a 2-year residential program for youth at risk. It provides them with the opportunity to gain gainful employment and self-sufficiency. And one of the main targets of the program is those students affected by urban poverty. And we're going to look at that more, because when we look at urban poverty, we look at who is the cohort that the program addresses, and therefore the risk that this government, in my respectful opinion, is running by not giving attention to a program that is not only apparently seems successful based on data, but is intended to achieve some of the goals that the government has said it is very much focused on what it should be, which is socioeconomic equality, ensuring that all of us benefit and all of us get an opportunity to move forward. So the MILAT also talks about preparing for the world of work, ensuring that you become an asset to your community, allow you to build your family life, self-sufficiency, and it dismantles, and this is the point, which talks about from the government's point of view, is a comprehensive, and I took it from AI, yes I did. So you can go to AI, but you know, as you will all know, is that if you go to AI, is what you ask, is what you get back. So you've got to put a theory or thesis first to AI before you will get the answer you were looking for or not. So in any event, in AI, giving a definition of what is MILAT, it's a comprehensive, inclusive educational system which is critical for dismantling socio-economic inequality by providing a tailored skills training through specialized intervention. So it looks at youths who are most vulnerable, and it is aligned with Goal 4 of United Nations Development Goals, which is providing a quality education. So if you look at it from a broader perspective, which I'm sure the minister would have had to have done, you would look to see what is it supposed to address. It's supposed to address the issue of exclusivity, where persons are left out of the system because they simply cannot function at the academic level. So by excluding students in this environment, you can entrench class divide. And this is what the government supposedly does not want to happen. So the point of MILAT is to ensure at-risk students are given the opportunity so they are able to get the same academic opportunities as students who are not at risk and therefore contribute to the sustainable development of their country. And that goes to the national development, another broad goal, which Minister Sturge must have looked at in deciding should we close it or temporarily should it suspend it. Let me be careful with that, because he did use the word suspend. Looking at that, he talks about equipping the marginalized, again the word marginalized youth, with both technical skills, behavioral discipline, and decreasing youth unemployment. So you're looking to rescue the most vulnerable. So the issue, therefore, has the program done that? And there you do look at United Nations Development Goals, Goal 4, that talks about quality education. And among the goals that the United Nations Development Goals, Goal 4, specifically addresses, which is relevant to the MILAT program, is equal access to affordable technical, vocational, and higher education, elimination of all discrimination in education, and education for sustainable development. So those are some of the goals. Now the question, which I started with at the very beginning, why close it down? Why suspend it temporarily? Why do that when in fact every indicator shows that in fact instead of temporarily shutting it down, you should be putting more money into a program that using the whatever the yardstick, the goals that you have to measure it against, it has been very successful. Why do I say that? This is why the critics have issues with the suspension of the program. They said the government of Trinidad and Tobago has not provided not even one statistical data showing that the MILAD program facilitates or leads a life of crime. When pushed on it, according to the research, they're saying that the justification is that MILAD has not decreased the murder rate. I mean, I didn't know that's what it's supposed to do. But if that is your argument, that's about as weak as you can get. Has MILAD contributed to the murder rate? Has MILAD program increased the criminal rate in Trinidad and Tobago? No, that's not what the answer was. It says you have not seen a reduction in the murder rate. And that in itself is very telling, because why would you say that about MILAD? Why would you even, your argument for shutting it down or closing it down temporarily be that it didn't increase the murder rate? So therefore, are you looking at MILAD as an opportunity to increase social and economic equality? Are you looking at MILAD as an opportunity for persons to achieve academic excellence? And therein rise the data. The government has provided not one statistical data, at least at the point at which I have done the research, to support their decision to suspend the program and cut down the expenditure on the program by almost 1/3. What are the facts? There's strong CSEC performance. The recent data revealed 51%, that's 1 in 4 of the cadets, received a full CSEC certification. High subject pass rate. And I looked at that, and what was very telling is that when you looked at the pass rate in key subjects like maths and English, not only was it very high, but against the national average, students who are not at risk, students who are not what you consider the most vulnerable in our society, when you look at it, you see how well students who are coming at the risk of expulsion, how well they have performed in the MILAD program. And why do I say that? Well, I already said that 51% of the students, 1 in 4 of the candidates have received full certification, which means 5 CXC subjects. They also said 100% of the cohorts achieved at least 1 subject. But let's look at the key English and maths. And this is July 2020, so it's comparing it with the national average. In English, 86% of the students got a pass rate in English language, as compared to the national average of 75 to 80%. So they did even better than the national average. When it came to maths, another key indicator, 66.3% of the students from MILAD achieved a passing in CXC in maths. When you look at the national average, they're not the at-risk students, 42 to 45% was the average. When we looked at and I already said the full passes, 1 in 4. So they have done pretty well both in maths and English. And when you look at the structural issues, according again to this came from the Ministry of Education, the program has been deemed structurally sound for behavioral academic reform to such an extent that the Ministry of Education previously mandated it as a primary transition pipeline for expelled students. So both from a structural point of view, both from that academic performance point of view, their program has done extraordinarily well. Remembering who is the cohort that you are catering for, and yet we could not get from the, they also had this, it's showing that the program has grown from strength to strength. They said that the first certification rate of 51% is an increase from 31% in 2023 and 39% in 2022. So it hasn't gone worse, so you have to go and review it. It seems based on the data. And by the way, where's yours? Where's your data? Where's you to tell me that the program needs to be reviewed?
Let me just interject here, because when you look at how he described the situation, they hope to complete the restructuring quickly, but can provide details, right? So all he said is they want to restructure in the shortest possible time.
What does that mean?
Now, when they go on, Guardian, I'll say the media house, they asked about details. What would it involve? If there'll be smaller intake moving forward for your teachers, because if there's a budgetary concern. And let's not forget, what are you comparing the budget to in order to make a proper assessment on if the budget is overblown or necessary? Because this is not just, you can't compare it to the average cost of educating a student in the normal education system. This has greater demands and greater needs because this program is an expanded program. It has more services to provide it, to allow it to work, right? More on that in a bit. So asking about, okay, do you want to downsize? You want to deal with rising costs? How are you going to do that? He said all these questions will be answered closer to the end of July. Here's my issue, because Karen, you said you hope that he took a holistic approach, a holistic analysis, but I would argue the fact that you shut it down, yes, I know you don't, yes, you suspended it. Yes, I know that you're not gonna, you might discover things in the process to cause the plans to change. But for the most part, we're not talking about you investigating a gang. We're not talking about you investigating a hostile foreign power. We're talking about you, looking into a government-run program, right? You should be able to have a fair idea and plan for what you intend to do so that as soon as you suspend it, you start already. But the implications are, well, you'll get the details at the end of July. Are you still now looking? Are you still now doing your analysis of the situation? That should have been done before you suspended it, right? There seems to be no sense of urgency. And whenever a politician says, well, we will have the details later, the implication is because you don't have the details now.
And can I just say this? I don't even want to go down the road you're going, because implicit in what you're saying is that the program needed such review and such overhauling that it required its suspension temporarily. That is not what the data is showing. The data is not supporting you, Minister.
No, well, it's...
No, because if you're going to come to me and tell me you are making and using broad generalizations of structural reform and economic viability, which whatever that means, which people don't know what you mean by that, and without backing it up with data, what you are saying, listen, we have a program. This is what the program was intended to achieve. These were the key performance indicators. This is what the program, as we have in the United Kingdom, United States, globally, this is what it was intended to do for at-risk students. However, data shows that we have not achieved that. In fact, we have gone beneath that, and as a result of which, we need to look at the program and find what is wrong so we can make it better. That's not what you're saying. You are not saying that, Sean. He's not saying that. If I know. And I talk about politicians. You want to know what the politician in me says? The politician, I'm not saying I'm right, but my goodness, when you look at the data which is counter to what he's saying, you have to ask yourself, is it about the fiscal deficit? Is it about reducing expenditure? Because of the three major budgetary allocations every year, education, health, and national security among them. Is it going to be a question and we need to cut it, because you did cut it by 1/3, so I don't know how it could be temporary. You already, in the estimates of expenditure, reduced it from 27 to 18. It makes you wonder if you sat down and said, well, we need to do some cutting here and there. What are we going to cut? Well, education. What program in education we need to cut? Well, let me do it my, okay, well, if you're going to, I'm telling you, I'm the politician. Right, wait, let me just finish.
Hold on. So I was going to say,
I'm going to finish.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. And then when you say that we're going to cut our mileage, say, but how are you going to cut mileage, And that's what I'm going to talk about now. That's a very sensitive issue, cutting mileage. How are you going to... We're going to talk about structural review, and just like how we did with CPEP and URP, and then we went and said we have to do some structural review, economic viability, use some kind of fancy words, and we're going to do it temporary. That's what it's sounding like to me. But you know what is the problem with that argument? You have to back it up. Back it up. Back it up with data. Show me this is what in 2025, this was the result, 2024, this is the vision objective, and this is what has happened. You've got to back it up, but you didn't back it up. What has happened is counter to what you have said. What you have said. The fact is that the program has been extremely successful based on the vision and objectives of the program. So you have a real problem convincing me as a member, and I want to deal, and let you make a point short, but I want to make the point too, where it becomes even more worrisome in a country such as Trinidad and Tobago. It's not me saying this, the United Nations Development Program did a report, so it's not me saying this, that when you look at the cohort that is most impacted by that, you have to wonder if the government looked at whether this benefits all of Trinidad and Tobago, whether it creates divisiveness in this country, whether it causes division in this country, whether it goes against sustainable development, whether it counters a socio-economic equality. That is the questions you need to ask yourself. And when you look at that as a government, when you sit down there and make a decision which program you are going to trim, and you rationalize your reason for doing so, you got to be very sensitive as to the cohort that you are dealing with, given the objectives that you say that you have as a government, and given the real demographics of this government and the sensitivity, which has brought many of the critics who have spoken against your suspending the program. It has come simply down to the demographics. Who are you affecting the most? Okay.
Now, I was going to say,
yes,
if you look at the situation with CPEP, right?
There you go.
They ended CPEP, and we all assumed that there was things wrong with CPEP. But here's the key. It's not that they ended CPEP, and it's not that they attempted to investigate CPEP, or if they had charges, I can't remember. It's how long it took from ending CPEP to then actually saying, oh, we're gonna hold people responsible. Well, why didn't you just say that from the beginning?
Why did you do that first?
Right, because they didn't go through the exercise properly. They didn't get the details properly. They just did their thing, and then they were looking for a reason or justification post-fact, and not post-fact as in the next day, post-fact as in months later. So now in this case, it makes you question, first of all, if the motivation with regards to CPEP and URP was actually cleaning it up. Let's not forget CPEP and URP existed during the partnership now, in much the same way. But let's put that aside. With regards to MILAT, now, given the fact that the minister is not prepared with data, it looks as though they have a fiscal outcome, a result that they have predetermined, similar to CPEP and URP. And the reason, it's not that they didn't necessarily analyze MILAT yet, it's that they haven't found whatever it is they're looking for. That's the implication. That's the implication, because he doesn't know what it's going to look like moving forward, because they don't know how much they could justify cutting. Right? Now, here's the further point, because how do you justify a program's existence like MILAT? You can't just do dollars and cents and compare it to government secondary school or preschool school, and what is the budgetary cost of that versus the budgetary cost of this. Because there's two things. One, we already know the education system does not have enough tools to deal with students that are habitual rule breakers, that have pushed the boundaries beyond one or two suspensions could keep them in line, right? We already seen school violence. Students fight in front of police officers, right? Students don't care with regards to the normal threats about normal punishments. MILAT is one of the few programs that seemingly is effective, one, and two, you can look to before having to then actually turn to the police to say, hey, we need you to be directly involved. The second thing is this: the government has used the mythical social programs to deal with crime as justification for some of their own legislation, like the Zoso bill. Justification to deny independent senators their concerns, to flat out reject any amendment like a sunset clause for a piece of legislation which, at this point, given what we've seen with the state of emergency, one should question. I'm not saying that it is guaranteed to be questionable, but one should question the ethics behind such a legislation and the intention behind it. But more importantly, it was very convenient that social programs are so important to the social legislation. We couldn't even put in a sunset clause on what is a controversial piece of legislation where everybody has a lot of questions and we don't necessarily want to adopt it right away. But for this social program, which again, how do you put a price on it, especially when you don't have alternatives? Or we could question the hell out of it. Right? We can question it till the cows come home. So again, once again, the government's modus operandi, particularly with national security, seemingly is very inconsistent at best, and you could speculate what is the at worst.
Can I just, with what you've said, we did not discuss much of this, and it was very telling that if Sean, without us discussing it, made a correlation between this program, MILAT, and URP and CPEP, because it's the same cohort.
Well, you didn't mention it.
I did.
You mentioned it, but I was thinking about it. Okay, no, because I mentioned it before. She mentioned it to me yesterday. We didn't talk about the details. Not yesterday, sorry, when we spoke on Monday. But I believe I did bring it up when I did.
All right, okay, but that's one point, but so you see the connection that people are going to make. And the other thing is this whole idea that the MILAT just dealing with crime, not dealing with crime only, is training persons at risk in the system to get the academic achievement, and that's what they say. And has it done that? That is what you have to ask yourself, and I just gave you some data. I just gave you data on the national average, and that would include the prestige schools, the non-prestige schools. They will include the students, the average student, and look at their performance in maths and English, and you know that the students you're dealing with, these are students at the risk of being expelled because of their poor academic performance that are doing better than those students on average. What other proof do you need? And by the way, I just want to go to the urban poverty point, and also the point of a location stigma, because the ZOSA point, which is one of the things that has troubled me, is that the ZOSA appeared, you are stigmatizing a community. Quite a problem, the fact that you're letting the whole argument about, you know, where the criminals know to move on. You are stigmatizing our whole community by saying you're going to tie down that particular community and submit it or put all these measures in place. You can do that in countries where there is where the population is homogeneous, populations like Jamaica, where everybody is the same. Trinidad and Tobago is a very sensitive issue which you must be aware of. So coming to the point of, again, and I'm going to look at the issue of urban poverty, because the students who it is focused on are students who are exposed to urban poverty. And then let's see who those students are, which I'm sure the Ministry of Education read it, and I'm sure the research officers read what I'm going to read right now.
I just want to, one last thing, with regards to soft measures, I also have a concern, because it's important, right? But it seems as though, because the soft measures aren't all run by National Security Ministry, it seems as though those are some of the things that are being picked away on the basis of trying to deal with the deficit in various ways, right? Chipping away at it at a time when arguably we probably need more of both hard and soft measures, but I'll just say that, right?
And if they're succeeding, so coming to the point of economic viability, which I had started with, and I'm reading from AI, but I asked AI the question, right? I phrased it in such a way. And if they didn't agree, they would have said otherwise. Oh gosh. So it says economic viability in the MILAT military-led academic training program depends on whether the spending achieve the program's strategic goals rather than the total amount of money spent. And what are the core evaluation metrics? Value for money. High initial expenditures are economically justified if the program successfully changes the life trajectory of the youth. And that is what we are saying. So when you come and cannot tell me that, but you talk about crime as if so the program is about crime then. The program is about crime then. It's to deal with criminals then. It's to stop the young criminals becoming senior criminals then. It's not about, it's so that you already put in your mind what the program is supposed to do, and you're telling the national community that is how they must view the MILAT. And let me just talk about what they said when they gave the definition of MILAT. They said it's students who are exposed to urban poverty. So I'm going to read this, and I have made this point many years ago in a different forum. Are we going to look at, when we're looking at gang violence and so on, what are we looking at? Why is it among urban poor that you find more prevalent than among the rural poor, even though you may have the same, other things are changing, but that's because many of the people who live in the urban poor areas, urban centers, are moving into rural communities now. But in any event, this is what the research says. While urban and rural poverty present severe difficulties, urban areas create unique compounding pressure for at-risk youth, and I'm sure we can relate to this. Proximity to gang networks. I'm sure we know about that. How many gangs they have in this country. High density urban, this is research, and actually there was a paper, Harvard lecture, which I did not look at, but that was what he was also considering. High density urban centers feature active gang recruitment targeting vulnerable young men. Don't we know that? Don't we know that? Hyperexposure and violent crime. Daily exposure to community violence and illicit economies. And of course, they're talking about informal trade, which of course is the drug trade, and social exclusion. Severe social stigma and structural displacement. Now, having said that, the MILAT program is dealing with behavior modification, academic and vocational certification, which I already looked at and showing how well they have done. But they did a study. And that's who are they speaking about, which I am sure research officers in the Ministry of Education have done the same research I have done and told the minister. before he spoke. Okay? He had to, because I was in government and you had research officers. That was what they did. So this is what the research says. It's a quasi-military intersection of geographic, socioeconomic, and ethnic dynamics. Youth violence, and this is what the report says, it's United Nations Development Study called No Time to Quit. And it says youth violence and homicide highly concentrated in urban areas and primarily impact lower socio-economic strata. And this is what the report has said. It says it makes, acknowledges that the demographic most exposed to urban gang recruitment and gang violence consists heavily of young males of African descent in specific urban centers. Conversely, at-risk youth in rural areas face severe resource isolation, and what the research shows, alcoholism, domestic violence, those are the issues that they are working at. So confronted with. When you talk about urban poverty, they specifically said, the report said, young Afro-Trinidadians are the persons most impacted by gang violence and gang recruitment. I am not saying that. I did not say that. And this is why the critics have said that cutting the program disproportionately harms young Afro-Trinidadians, halting abruptly the residential social programs without an alternative, and you're creating a vacuum. And we know nature abhors a vacuum. So you are now, instead of making the program stronger, which you should, you have now pulled back the program, and this very same thing you're supposed to be trying to prevent, you are creating the circumstances that the same thing that the program is intended to address, it may very well find itself dealing with. And that is why critics have come out and said, is it about dollars and cents, or is it about ensuring that students most at risk academically because of the urban poverty and the concerns of urban poverty present? Is that a program important and necessary for Trinidad and Tobago, not only from a national objective policy for the government, but on an look at it from a personal point of view. And with that, when Sean spoke, the UNDP report said, it says no time to quit engaging youth at risk. Explicitly confirmed that young Afro-Trinidadians make a living in economically depressed urban hotspots, are disproportionately vulnerable to and impacted by a life of crime, drugs, and deadly gang violence. Key findings of the report. I saw the Minister of Education write this, I saw the Minister saw this, because if I saw it, he saw it, right? Demographic vulnerability are overwhelmingly the victims, Afro-Trinidadians, overwhelmingly the victims and perpetrators of violent crime in urban centers. Urban disadvantage, suffer from severe underinvestment, generally high youth unemployment and social isolation. And what it says, one of the things it leads to, and I could attest to that, is location stigma, which is why when you spoke about ZOSA, that is why it resonated with me so much, because I know as a former lecturer at Hewering Law School, many of my students who did extraordinarily well are from those communities, but more so, talking about location stigma, I did say it before on this program, but it's worth repeating. When you talk about location stigma, I got a call from someone in a financial institution, said that someone had applied for a position as a lawyer, but they came from one of those so-called depressed urban areas. And they were concerned, just because they were concerned, because the student came from that particular thing, and they just wanted to know my view of the student. And I said, no, he was a good student, and I didn't have any problems with the person. About a year later, the person called me back and said how excellently that person was performing. But you see the location stigma, where people, when they're applying for jobs, will not put where they are living, because there is that, I'm not talking about who are not going up in those areas because of crime, because we know that is true. I'm talking about people who are, the people living on a street. Out of the 10 houses, 8 out of the 10 are law-abiding citizens working in the government and whose children have done very well and going to the so-called prestige schools. Why we don't do a study on that, right? And those children, we are going to university, and they cannot put their home address because of that location stigma. And that is one of the reasons I personally was against Isusa, because you are then reinforcing the fact that these areas are criminal hotspots. You know, and you're not understanding the damage, the psychological damage that you are doing to those persons. And the final point on that, because I was an educator, one of the things, opportunity, that is what Milet represents. When I went and studied law, that is when the decision was made that you had to have an indigenous legal education. If you wanted to practice law, yes, we have done some amendments to the law a few years back, but it's a minimal impact. The point was that if you want to practice law in your country or in any other Caribbean island, you had to have a legal education certificate issued by the Council of Legal Education from the Caribbean, which meant that if you wanted to be a lawyer, you had to study in your country. You had to study in Trinidad or Barbados. What did that mean? It stopped what had happened before. Many people who came from the so-called middle class who could afford to send their children off to England and could pay those tuition fees. When I did law, most of the students, I would say 80% of the students in my class came from backgrounds that they certainly had financial constraints in them pursuing law and would not have done it if they could not have done it in Trinidad and Tobago, because he'd had family, but mostly it was financial concerns. At least 80%. And many of those persons whose names I will not mention have gone on to be judges in this country, legal luminaries. And if I call somebody names, names that you recognize. And at that time, what were they called? Locally assembled. But what did they need? Opportunity. That's what they needed. Opportunity. Milet represents that opportunity. And what is the minister doing? Pulling the rug against all the data that counters his argument and coming with broad generalizations because he can't give you statistical data. And coming with that and adding insult to injury, knowing full well the UNDP study saying who are the persons most affected. Just like a CPEP and URP, I'm sorry to say. You may not like hearing it, but guess what? That's what people think. That is what people think. And for you to come, I hope at the end of July, whatever fiscal deficit it appears that you're trying to address, because that is how it's coming across, in the face of data that you can't counter. You are not countering that data. In fact, the data supports the strategic objectives of the program and it's showing the program. Every program needs tweaking. Every program needs improving. Nobody's saying it's perfect, but every indication is that it is doing what it's intended to do. So you are having a real problem telling me that you are going to suspend it and all your conversation was your estimates of expenditure. You have a real problem with that. And that is why people have come out and we see who the people are who are opposed to your doing that, and you cannot come back with a good answer. And instead of, this is something, a broad statement. I am not against this government. I want you to succeed. But my goodness, is that your indication that when we win, everybody wins? That's what you mean? Because I'm sorry, your minister said it, You can't get vexed with me in Parliament. He didn't say every other word was when he said it. So I am not saying platform talk. He said it in Parliament when he presented his budget of all things. So how could you be saying that when the actions do belie the words? How could you be saying that? How could you build up trust and confidence in a country where demographics is such an important factor as opposed to Barbados or Grenada or St. Vincent or Jamaica? We have our unique situation. How could you be telling us that when what you're doing is not consistent or aligned with what you are saying? It's just not, and you cannot present a reasonable argument against it. You're not doing that. What could you do? Do you need to cut the program? How about thinking outside the box? How about doing what IMF has told you to do, doing what Moody's has indicated to you should do, Standard & Poor's, every international agency has said, increase your revenue position, not by taxing people with only, I think they agreed with the taxation too, so I'm not going down that route, but diversification. Why can't you integrate This program, the MyLab program, which comes under the wide umbrella of the Ministry of Tertiary Education, the other sister programs, and use that as part of the diversification. You know I've spoken about culture tourism. I don't want to go down that road too much, but what I'm saying is you have the, when I looked it up, most of the MyLab program does focus on academics, but it also focuses on, computer and graphic design, basic technology, entrepreneurship, makeup artistry, which Trinidad is Carnival, and the programs such as pastry and cake making, and social media and cultural programs. So what I am saying is, instead of going down that route that is going, that you can't justify, not from what you said up to now, instead of doing, why can't you integrate the MyLab program and take away the stigma of the MyLab program and show these students were at risk, but they have so much ability? Why don't you want to praise that? Why don't you want to talk about that success? Why don't you want to say, look, this government has given these young people the opportunity and this is what they've been able to achieve? Why don't you take it as your ministry and integrate it and then develop your cultural tourism, wire bending, costume making, event planning? Trinidad is well known, pan tuning. Why don't you do something like that? But you're not doing that, you know. You're saying we're going to shut it down and you can't give me a good reason. So I have said enough on that this morning, and having done the research, it's really minister. Serge, as I said at the very beginning, I am not against yours. I want you to succeed. I do want you to succeed. We do want you to succeed. I want you to succeed. But while the road you're going down, you are only creating divisiveness and division in the country, and it's so unnecessary.
So before I say what I want to say, because Karen had a point with regards to the stigmatization of people living in hotspots. Before I get to what I want to say, I'll say this. I'm sure one of the things people are looking at is how AI is going to take over everybody's job. Well, the problem was AI was a bubble on venture capitalism. And now that the capital that was paying for everything is starting to dry up and they need to commercialize their AI products, the actual operating costs are hitting corporations like a ton of bricks, because running these things, building these data centers and operating them are not cheap. So right now, the age where labor will be a thing of the past and needing to train our population, that is nowhere near anytime soon, right? And even if you had things like AI-driven trucks, you honestly think, first of all, implementing that might be a headache over here, but that is just one area of employment, right? There will always be enough areas of employment for programs like MyLab to be able to impart necessary skills for our young people to function in society. Now, with that said,
and contribute to the sustainable development of Trinidad and Tobago, instead of talking about the crime.
Speaking about development, hotspots, we stigmatize them, but this is where I believe we should look at it as being harmful, because what was one of the topics of conversation, one of the correlations of crime? Well, there's only certain racial demographics, blah, 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 blah. Well, I think the key point is how many other racial demographics live in urban centers, low-income housing centers, like what we see in some of the hotspots, right? Because usually we draw correlations with the United States. Although, again, if you kind of look at what areas hit poverty in the various states, it's not all 50 states, it's one race, right? It's multiple races where you will get different versions of how poverty is affecting a population and driving young men and some young women into crime, right? It's just that every race has their stereotype. Every state has different demographics, so you'll see different demographics come to the fore. And I think one of the things we should also look at is, and yes, I know that they have, you know, the similar situation with regards to non-whites in urban centers in the United Kingdom, but you also have whites in various different ways, right? It might not be high rises, it could be old industrial towns where the industrial factories, those industries no longer relevant in the 21st century, and the poverty in those areas and how that has affected the stigma of their poverty, has affected their opportunities, has affected their prospects in life. So for some of them, they turn to crime. And you can find examples that shows it's not about demographics. A lot of it comes down literally to, well, when you're poor, you just have less advantages. right? And then on top of that, when you have a system that whether unintentionally or intentionally preys upon you, unintentionally in the sense of wider society might want to ignore you, and intentionally in the sense of, well, the criminal gangs are going to have to recruit somebody. And you ain't gonna go into some rich people area. They might get a few, by the way, just saying. You might get a few adventurous ones, but you ain't gonna be recruiting your foot soldiers in rich people area. No, you're gonna go to people desperate. And from their desperation, you will capture their loyalty, and they will do things for you that would be insane otherwise.
Yeah, but I just want to make the point, because you see, this is, to me, important. You can say that about any community, rural or urban, but the thing is that there's a concentration of it. And that is what they talk about. Let me just read what they said at UNDP, right? And which is why they must know, that is the government must know, that the demographics do matter in this country. And that's why suspending mileage is not based on just that alone, cannot be a good approach or prescription. So what it says, the report said, the report emphasizes that crime in Trinidad and Tobago cannot be decoupled from broader human development challenges. Regional and national frameworks built upon this data underscore that when marginalized youth are deprived of quality education and sustainable livelihoods, gangs fill the void by providing artificial security and financial stability. Then they talk about the structural, from the structural point of view. The gang as employers, proliferation of drug and weapon transshipments offer lucrative weekly returns compared to sparse legal options. Educational exclusion. High dropout rates leave youth exposed to early recruitment by senior gang members. So what they're saying is that if you live in an urban center, the factors or the risk factors that are unique to our urban centers are very much the risk factors that attract the kind of criminal activity that Trinidad and Tobago is doing, the gang violence, the drugs, and so on. And so it's not a question of putting the horse in front of the carriage. No, it is the circumstances of the demographics of those areas and those risk factors that cause us to see that there's a high concentration of criminal activity, not because of ethnicity, but because of the circumstances that are associated with urban poverty. When they looked at rural poverty, which the study did look at, they did look at the issue of social exclusion. They did look at the issue, and what they said, the major factors were alcoholism and domestic violence. So they did recognize that they do have risk factors. They are not the same risk factors based on this study, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in other global and regional communities that urban communities do. And that's why if you are going to recruit, you're going to have, not only would you not want to go in an economically advantaged household or community, but it's going to be far more difficult to do that in a rural community as opposed to urban community where there's a high concentration of young people who are at risk because of circumstances. So all I am saying is, however it came about, it is a reality. Why it came about, it is a reality. Whether we like it or not, that is it. I mean, I'm not arguing why, wherefore, it is so. And the studies show why it is so. Now, if you want to spend a lot of time saying what you have to say and add to the division in this country, divide this, go ahead. Just go ahead, see where that takes us. But if you want to face the reality and show that these communities are high recruitment communities and the reasons that are the risk factors associated with urban poverty and location stigma, etc., how it came about, if you want to address that, and as a government, create social and economic equality, sustainable development, then programs of mine that cannot be shut down, cannot be suspended on issues of economic viability and structural reform, and which are such generalized, I mean, they don't even mean anything really. I could say that about European CPEP, and that is why you got to push back on those programs. Please don't say that you don't know. Do not say that you do not know that the reason, one of the main reasons that you got so much pushback on CPEP and URP, because similarly, those programs are focused on urban centers where there's socio-economic deprivation, and we know what the demographics are. Whether it should be, do not say you do not know. You have to know. And that is why when you make a decision to temporarily suspend mileage, in the face of all the strategic objectives and goals that seem to be they may not have been fully realized, but are on their way to doing so, when it creates so many opportunities where the data supports that, and when you are looking at a demographic that in Trinidad and Tobago is more so an issue in our country than it is in other Caribbean islands. We do know that. So let us take off the magic lens of our eyes and be the politicians that you also are, because politicians can do good. Politicians create policy. And what I'm suggesting to the minister is that when they do the review, let us look at ways in which we can enhance the program, expand the program, and deal with the various risk factors because we do have those, we have risk factors in rural communities. We do have concerns in rural communities. They also say there's underinvestment in education. So, as I said, we started the discussion with Milas, and when I told Sean that I was going to look at it, the more I looked at the research, and I guess being involved as an educator myself, and also being involved in policy making in as part of government, it really concerns me that the government is, in my respectful opinion, shooting themselves in the foot unnecessarily when they have a great opportunity to do what they say that they mean, that when we win, everybody wins.
Well, I'm glad you closed with that.
Minister Tanko, eh?
I'm glad you closed with that, because the thing is, it's not just removing the program that seemingly is giving you good results by all statistical measures, right? It compares, think about it, as Karen was saying, these are some of the most at-risk youths, and their results are comparable to the national average, right? Or potentially better than the national average, right? That is a basic litmus test, right? Or if it wasn't meeting that standard, then maybe you start the conversation, but it's hard to start the conversation with that standard. But here's the thing, part of it too is you saying that, you know, it's almost like if you're hoping that they did the research, or you're saying that they should know. I don't know why we should assume that they know, to be honest. I suspect, again, whatever the agenda is, right, it's not what they're telling us, because they haven't really told us much of anything. It's open-ended, potentially for a reason. And therein lies the problem. I think that because of how they're communicating. When you communicate with a lack of information, right, and you make moves like this, it's going to come across a certain way. A certain segment of the population is going to start to think, is it political? Why? Because it's going to be charged. It's going to be controversial. You should anticipate the fact that people are going to speculate and assume that this is politically motivated. So then you should know our communication on these sensitive matters needs to be as thorough as possible with as much information as possible so that our intentions are made clear. But what tends to happen when politicians don't want clear intentions to be portrayed to the population
or it appears so.
Or it appears so, it then makes it look like, no, we have things to hide. So by making it look like you have things to hide, it fuels public speculation that this is politically motivated. And part of it then is also based on certain stakeholders' comments on the correlation between crime and PNM held constituencies. The fact that Milat is, technically speaking, potentially looking to not necessarily targeted at a demographic, but you see the results with a racial demographic, right? It then brings in the question, what is your priority not to help? Because this is the thing, as Karen was saying, the government should be aware, if what you're saying is true, that this is where the crime comes from, right? That from the PNM constituencies. Why are you interfering with a program that helps address it? Why are you stripping it? Because you already cut the budget, so you already stripped it in one hand. And then he says, well, we have to be ready. We have to try. I don't know if he thinks they could suspend it and solve everything in a month, and if they can, kudos to them. Right? I don't know if Form 4 students should be in class now or have exams or what have you, and it's not disrupting their class schedule. I know if it was like an examination year, things might be a little bit different, but Form 4 is not an examination year as far as I'm aware. But the fact of the matter is, if you wanted to make major overhauls to the program, why didn't you wait until the current cohort is finished, make minor adjustments in the meantime, and then when the current Form 4s are done, right? But no, that speaks to me that the agenda, the priority is budget, not the effectiveness of the program. Because now those students, I have not heard enough to give me confidence that they are not in limbo. And we've seen just what COVID did to the education system, to multiple year groups of students. Yes, this might be a small number, and yes, this might be students who technically they're not part of your voting base, so you might not care as much, right? That's how it looks to members of the public. But ultimately speaking, what's going to happen to them when you do this? Because given the fact that you can't give us details on what your intentions are, right? We know that your intentions, might face reality and might have to adjust. But given the fact that you can't even give us what your intentions are, how could you give us any guarantee that MILAT will be restarted in a timely enough manner for the current crop of Form 4s who should be, I assume, going into Form 5 in September, for it to be ready so that their education is not significantly disrupted? Because let's not forget, one of the things with at-risk youth is that you have to consistently show up for them. And if you suspend the program, if you basically tell the trainers and teachers and facilitators, hold on, things are suspended, you have to wait, right? What happens to those young men when the people who basically, emotionally, psychologically, they were relying on to be their guiding light, to pull them out of whatever situation these young men were in, are now told that things are suspended? What does that do for their psyche? What does that do for their development in an already fragile or sensitive state, right? Was any thought given to that? No, everything implies this is about budget. And when you take a wider lens now, why does it seem as though the government, I asked the question before, Stuart Young, where are you going to find the money to do all these things you promised? Everybody went in? Well, more and more, and we spoke about this before, it's nickel and diming the population in various ways. If crime is a priority, I do not know how you could justify this decision, to be honest. We're not talking about saving $5 billion here, right? We're talking about a few million.
Yeah, but come back to my point, I hope I was clear about, is that if it is that you are saying that you're going to review a program, it means that the program is in trouble. It means that the program is not achieving a strategic objective, which is why you can justify it. And you may not have given me particulars, but that is not what the facts are saying. That's what I want to, at least I want that to come across. What it's saying is all the strategic objectives of the program are being actually given the cohort that you're dealing with. And when I say that, I'm talking about students on the verge of being expelled from the system, both structurally and both in terms of results. So it is not fair to say that you're trying to fix a system that's broken. What is more correct to say is that we have a system that is working, that all the indicators show that what we are doing is good. And what we need to do if we want to continue to achieve those strategic objectives for the country and for the individual, we don't need to shut it down, we need to enhance it. But if you come out and say that you are going to review something, implicit in those words are there's something wrong with it. This is what I want to leave this with. The data that has been provided, which the government has not provided, which has been provided otherwise, does not support a program that is in trouble, a program that is not achieving objectives. In fact, what it is showing is that the very same students, given the right opportunities, the right environment, they will do well, and therefore we not only accept that the program is a good program, but it's a program that we need to increase. So we don't need to review it, because when I use the word review, I am saying something is wrong with the program. You have not shown me, given the student population that you're dealing with, you have not demonstrated to me that that is the case. That is very dangerous, because it is reinforcing a view that, you see, look at these students, they are criminals, that's why they have been in a program trying to stop them from going into life of crime, and that's why the ministers have to review it and see whether it makes sense to continue. That's the impact. That's what you're telling me, That is not what the program is saying. The program is saying we are doing well. We are doing what they have done in other at-risk communities globally, and we are succeeding. So stop putting the stigma on them. Stop stigmatizing MILAT. It is unfair to these students. It's unfair. They were not doing well because of the challenges, whatever the challenges were, which we spoke about. But what the program is showing, give me the opportunity and I will do well. And that is what you should focus on. Don't tell me about reviewing, because if I buy into your argument about reviewing and I use those words, I am saying that something is wrong. And I am also saying, I don't care if you went to the best school in Trinidad and Tobago, the most prestigious school in Trinidad and Tobago. You look at the students coming in with SEA. Those are the top students, you know. When you get into those so-called prestige schools, you have excelled academically to get in there. And yet when we look at the CSEC results, it is not consistent with the student that came in there 5 years ago, which is to say that even the best of the best schools, with the best of the best students, with the best of the best parents, with the best, whatever the best of the best, you still have challenges. More so, you should be selling Milat. You should be praising Milat. You should be saying how fantastic Milat is. You should be saying that we need to copy that program, because the program is doing so well to achieve both the government, national objectives, and the personal, community-based objectives. That's what you should be doing. But instead of you doing that, you are feeding into that whole issue of location stigma. You are feeding into that idea that we are dealing with students who are at risk, and we need to look at it because something we need to correct it. Yes, you need to correct it, but you have to correct it that much. And if you have to correct it, give me the data that supports what you are saying. That's what I want to see, because Sean, the reason I am saying that and being so repetitive is because I am concerned that persons listening to the program can go away and with the view that, you see what I'm saying? They have to review the program, you know, because something wrong with the program. Something wrong with those students. I'm telling you, they look at the students. Those are the students in Ghana. And you see, if you start going down that rabbit hole and going down there, you are feeding into, whether you intend to or not, into the stigmatization of people who are in that program, who are doing well, and we should encourage it and allow them to contribute to our country and our national development. That is what, and stop the talking about as if something is wrong with the program itself. Apparently something isn't.
Now, before we go any further, we'll open the phone lines. We should be able to maybe go, well, as we do these days, a little bit later. So call in and have your say if you want to talk about this or other topics, but obviously this is the main one. I just want to say, and with regards to what you just said, that's why I say, what is the priority of this move, right? It doesn't seem that there's something to fix,
this is what
right?
I'm saying.
It doesn't seem as though there's anything to fix with Milat. Right, as you say, it potentially should be expanded, and if you expand it, you could maybe, I don't know, achieve economies of scale. The cost per student might go down, assuming you could get enough trained staff to ensure that the quality of the program is not diluted, and you can make savings that way, because as far as I'm aware, you need more social programs to deal with crime, not less. A state of emergency. Well, but when I say social, usually these are things done not by the Ministry of National Security, but by the Ministry of Education. Is first and foremost social development, youth and gender affairs, and so on and so on. So we probably need more things like this, not less. Arguably speaking, a state of emergency cannot exist perpetually forever. I have more to say on this, but we have Claxton B on the line. Caller, good morning, you're on here.
Yeah.
Morning.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Sean and Mr. Shera. You know, this, it's so sad, eh? And you know why this government doing all this thing? Because people in this country, people like you all too, Sean and Mr. Shera, is only how this government doing this nonsense, you know, because they never really pull them up and pull up the people that support them to let them know, hey, if it wasn't all what they talk about, if it wasn't the PNM, Mr. Shera, you and Sean and many other people in this country would not have what they have. Even down to the Indian people. The Indian, the Syrian, and the Chinese, these are the people who benefit under the PNM. They benefit, and it's sad to see that this government today could do all this rubbish. And you have people sitting down and saying nothing is like they're just mashing up the country piece by piece for what? Because of what? They don't even understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. They're not, nobody can, people out here talking to themselves because they don't understand what it is going on. You have programs going so good, you mash up that. Why? You can't even tell the people why. They say that there was ghost gang in the URP, the forestry, the CPEC, but nobody get locked up. You understand? Then you have people now in the night when I come from clinic with my daughter. You have people in the night walking with a headlight on the side of the road and all kind of foolishness. What is going on in this country, boy? Then you're making bacchanal with CARICOM. Where we going? Why we doing all this? What is we really want for this country? What it is? I'm trying my best to understand what it is this government really want for our country, boy. You understand why they are doing all this thing? The next thing we don't even know if they sell this country to Donald Trump or some kind of thing. That is why she had to follow all this kind of unnecessary thing what they're doing to bring hardship only on a certain set of people, you know, mainly the Africans, because the Indian people not seeing that they is going to suffer too. They will all suffer. Everybody eventually will suffer because what they're doing is wrong. And we must come out and tell them that they are doing something wrong, Sean. We must. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Well, I mean, I thought that's what we've been doing for quite some time. That's why I look confused partially in. And again, we try to be consistent. Although your friend from Dabadi, he's concerned, why do I always bring up the PNM? Well, I do sort of point out the consistent issues and to point out the fact that we're using the same standards to judge. But there are certain aspects now of this government that I guess you could say we're now touching on things we didn't quite say. This is different. The PNM had their own issues. Some things were unique to them. This is now touching on things that might be unique to this government as much as they do share some of the same behaviors.
I think we dealt with the mileage. I think Taxable should feel that we dealt with the mileage program as he's saying, but I don't see that you have for me calling.
Yeah, we have we have another call on the line. Arima, I believe it is. Caller, good morning, on here.
So, Michael Swell, good morning to you and Ms. Nunes Teixeira.
Morning.
I think you made an incorrect comparison when you compared Mylat to CPEP and URP. And I'll tell you why. You should have compared Mylat to the refinery.
I know why you're saying that.
In the sense that things that were working, things that were positively benefiting the country, the governments decided to close them down. And in the case of the refinery, the 800 billion bond bullet payment where they had to pay, it is going to cost them at least twice or 2.5 times that they started back. Let us hope that when they do decide to start back this Mylat program, same thing will apply. The only difference is that this one in the millions, whereas that in the billions. But it's the same, because when you watch at the errors now, both governments, past and present, picking people who have no experience in building houses to build houses. Imagine that. And you had the whole of in Dabadi there, that housing settlement. You had to go and refix it. This current one, want to give contracts to people who never know nothing about houses to build houses. Thing is, not inspired. Whoever Saddam Hussein had, yeah, that they put on the whole. But what I want to say is this. Because Ms. Nunes Teixeira was talking about urban poverty. I asked my students to multiply 75 cents US in TT, and they get $5.30-something. And I was telling them that is what 3/4 of Haiti population lives on when the day come. So when we talking about poverty, we in Trinidad and Tobago ain't really know nothing about poverty, you know. What we in Trinidad and Tobago really lack is ambition. And if the parents had the time to sit down and deal with the children and speak to them and guide them in the right way, this gang culture and this violence that we have in society it is going to go way, way down, you know, because it's ambition. We have to forget the doctors, lawyers, engineers, pilots, and accountants. Because the people who doing roofing and electrical installation and plumbing and tiles and all these things, they're making a lot of money. They're making a good living. And we have to invest in the skills of our children. What I would like to see as I end in here, the government run a pilot program in about 10 of the former junior sec schools and put in about 10 trades and take out half of the subjects. Because the success of MILAT, for me, is not the pass rates, you know, is what the graduates would have achieved when they left there. And seeing that most of them end up in the military or end up doing well, that is a successful program. That is how you judge a school, you know, by what the children come out after they leave school, not the passes that they get. Have a good day, all. A good program as usual. Love it.
Thank you, Paul.
I just want to just say this, you know, that's what we try to do, or I guess my training as a lawyer, is you try to keep the focus. Because when you start going all around, what you're doing, some people say you're deflecting, some people say you're going down a rabbit hole, and some people say you're giving opportunity now for discussion to move away from what I want to talk about, which was MILAT. And why I align MILAT with CPEP is because, one, it's not just poverty, it's urban versus rural, and it puts unique factors, risk factors associated with urban poverty, which is not what I have said, this is what the research has said. And number two, the reason why I made the alignment between the two, because it's the same cohort, and that is what the UNDP study looked at. And this is what the concern is, that in a country as Trinidad and Tobago, with our specific demographic circumstances different from most of the other Caribbean islands, nearly all I would imagine, that we have to be mindful of that when we're making decisions. And that's why I made the comparison between the two. But in any event, you are free to have your opinion, and thank you for making a contribution.
The refinery makes a similar point, but one of the key differences is the refinery was with a different government, whereas CPEP and URP could show a pattern of behavior with this government.
Can I ask you though, I don't know why I thought that when the former government, which is the current government, said they were again to close it down, they said, why did you restructure it? Wasn't that their argument? You've put so many people out of jobs, and you should have restructured rather. Well, why didn't the URP and CPEP? The same reason, Why you didn't restructure instead of closing down? That's why.
And that's where the refinery gives you a similar example.
Yeah, so that, you see, when he said the similarity, why you didn't restructure CPEP? Why you didn't restructure? Because you had it in your time. Why you didn't do that? But no, you close it down. Why you didn't tell them to close down? Why you told them with Petrotrim? Why you closed down and didn't restructure? Why you didn't do the same thing with CPEP? It's the same reason you said with MILAT, you temporary suspended it. That's the comparison. And that's the comparison.
We have Sanfan on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air?
I'm sorry.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
You know, Karen, I always have to give you your flowers, you know, that this MILAT thing is way bigger than people understand. Let me see this. A previous Kamala Prasad Bisesa government attacked a program like this, which was the youth camp program. And when she came in and they closed down most of those youth camps that the government had tried to, the PNM government, Mr. Manning, had tried to put back in place. So this is not anything new with Ms. Prasad Bisesa's government. That they attack these social programs for people that they look at risk, and most of those people are urban dwellers in Trinidad and Tobago. That is what they continue to do. This is a continuation. This is just, as she said, 2.0 of what's last time. That is what it is. And I want to say this to the caller from Arima, the educator, whom I must say I love your contribution, and know that you're on vacation. Enjoy your vacation because I know you're a hard worker. Let me say this to you. When Dr. Williams became the Prime Minister and decided to deal the same situation that you're talking about, he opened secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago with trades, just what you're speaking about, and academics. The population did not understand what Dr. Williams was trying to do and had an issue with it because they were so indoctrinated. Prestige schools, when your children have to go to these schools, that's what he had. Didn't understand Dr. Williams was trying to build from education as a first step. And those parents are the ones who decided and fought against that system. I was one of those, I went through one of those schools. I can tell you, my mother was a PTA member all through my school life. And when you had 2 shifts on a school, and you have 900 and something students on a shift, and when you have a PTA meeting, you have 30 parents. I went through that, and it is no different today in those same schools. And that is the problem. The problem is that there are a lot of parents who, when they send a child to school, there's a school problem and the government problem. Nothing going to change in Trinidad and Tobago until the mentality of the people that are populating the country, their mentality changes towards the education of the children. That's the problem in Trinidad and Tobago. Have a good day, Sean and Karen.
Thank you, caller.
I don't want to be too controversial, but you know,
I mean, we've spoken about that before as well.
No, but I can say more to respond to what they've said. Perhaps I shouldn't, but I don't know if you know about the Concordat. When Eric Williams determined that 80% of the passes at the prestige school, which I went to one, by the way, so and let me full disclosure, right? That they would get funding from the government. They left 20% to the school, the denominational school, and the students, I think, had to have a certain pass rate in order to qualify to get in. And they had, I believe, I'm subject to being corrected, the very next day, one of the daily newspapers that still function in this country had Hitler on the front page and saying that Eric Williams was akin to Hitler because he was putting too many chairs around that table. That issue about people talking about ambition and all that, that's a very, very volatile, and it's far more complex than you are saying that it is. And what it says is that if you give people an opportunity, the same argument that they use to keep you in your place by saying you don't have ambition, it is revealed, because those same schools, that is what the Concordat was a big issue for those persons whose children went to that school who were short of getting in there. And I could say more than that, and I prefer not to, but I did go to one of those schools, and I did see the students who excelled. I did see students who did not excel, who had to go to private secondary institutions, who you might have said came from the privilege that you are speaking about. And every level, they came from all the privilege that Trinidad and Tobago has to offer to those students, and yet those students were not even able to get in on the 20%. Why I say they couldn't get on the 20%? Because they were going to the private schools. What, they didn't have ambition? It's more complex than that. I am not saying they had or don't have, they probably had, but to come and bring it down to saying that the reason why some students do well because they peer, it's not as simple as that. A lot of it is opportunity, and that's what Milet shows, because you would have said the same thing about those students who went to Milet, and there might have been truth in it, but if you give them the opportunity, that's what America is known for, the land of opportunity. How many of our people leave here coming from junior secondary schools or schools that people perceive as not academically inclined and go into their system and do very well. How many of these schools in the United States, they send down, not headhunters, because that is for a job, but they send on their persons here. You know why? Because our students do so well, and not from the so-called prestige schools only, from other schools, because we bring up their GPA and they're able to get more funding. How many of our students go up to the United States and excel and become evaluated? Because and those same students, if they were here in this country, we would say they were not excelling because opportunity. So I am not saying that it's black and white. It is not black and white. But to come and put the idea, and it's a very dangerous argument about ambition, is to give a truth to the fact that those who do not do well do not have ambition. That is not, I don't think that is a fair conclusion to come to. That's what I'm saying.
I'll say this is why you shouldn't generalize,
yes.
Right? Because you could find anecdotal truth, but anecdotal is not universal. Two things. Well, a lot of things, try to wrap this up, this whole show, because the list is getting too long. First, a lack of ambition by a population could be a sign of poor leadership. Just saying. Who is supposed to be managing and setting our expectations? We're supposed to take our cues from our leaders, our guidance, right? We can't come to an accurate consensus on our own, because it's difficult for a population to just do so on its own when you have so many different viewpoints and perspectives. Now, with regards to what Karen was just saying, and I believe I brought this up before, right? And Mrs. Sands, I know you yourself is testament to this, I would say, but in a different way. I believe the former principal of Naparima Boys, he told us of this anecdote. They took a boy from a lesser performing school, dropped him in Naparima Boys, and he was able to more or less keep up with the average standard of the students there. He was not falling behind. He was not at the bottom of the percent. Now, he wasn't at the top of the class, but think about it. The premise of our education system is that a boy from a junior sec, or even at just a secondary, government secondary, should not, right, in theory, be able to keep up with higher achievers, except when placed in a different environment, he was more than able to keep up with the people who technically scored better than him in, at that time, I believe it would be common entrance. Now, with regards to what Mr. San Fernando said, because he's putting forward a different premise to what I was going to say, I'll say this. If it is a situation where, for whatever reason, a Kamala Prasad Bisesa-led government is undermining social programs that address crimes, then one can speculate, is it being done in order to perpetuate whatever policies that they want to perpetuate? And those policies may or may not be, if this is true, if this might be a thing, maybe it's not. Probably it's not, but maybe if it's so, maybe they want to perpetuate things like, I don't know, state of emergency, right? Because why deal with social programs that could potentially reduce crime in the other parties' areas when you could have a national state of emergency and deal with crime however it is you feel, but more importantly, it will look like as though you're accomplishing something. This is unfortunately how some politicians think. I'm not saying this is how the UNC politicians think, but their lack of information and transparency leaves them open to this kind of speculation, which I rather not do, but you don't want to give me information, what am I supposed to say? Now, I say all that to say, I don't necessarily think this is true because I have a different premise than Mr. San Fernando, and that's this, right? The priority to me seems to be, in this case at least, in that case they were flush with money, so it was not about budget in that case. But in this case it seems to me to be about budget. Again, going back to what Karen said, nothing seems to be wrong with the program. On contrary, it seems to be excelling in its role, in its mission statement, to the point where you could consider expanding it. But this is why I go further. Karen likes to focus. I like to go further to see how it all fits together more often than not, at the risk of, obfuscating the main point. Because as I said before, what is their policies, economically speaking? What did the minister say was a great success? All the fees and taxes that raised $250 million in 6 months. Oh my gosh, $500 million in a year, I believe. I don't even think it would have been $1 billion. The deficit is a lot more than 500 million, right? They're pinching pennies. I said this last year. when they were talking about how we save 10 million here and 20 million there, I'm like, hey, we know the deficit is not going to be solved. How many times do you have to find $1 million here and $1 million there in order to get to meet the deficit and not have to borrow anymore, right? So they're pinching pennies. We're still borrowing. The foreign debt is still going up. They blame the PNM for that. They're doing the same thing. That is very convenient that they don't even try to justify how they're doing the same thing that the previous government did, that they blame the previous government for. But it seems as though this is all about what is the predetermined outcome. We need to cut expenditure. And for whatever reason, at a time when they try to sell us on their great national security policies, I guess MILAT is not a priority. Because, don't know why. Maybe, is it because it wasn't created by a UNC government? I don't know. I haven't looked into to see who created it. Well, there you go. But regardless, right?
2007.
The government, the real problem the government is trying to solve with this move, obviously one, is not crime. Two, is not the disadvantage, the disproportional disadvantage for some of our citizens over others, right? Or three, any actual issue with MILAT. The problem they're trying to solve is their deficit. Because they said that, don't worry, we'll find the money, right? You don't worry, your little heads, you know, we'll find the money somehow. Except, as we have said multiple times in the past, the money is from your pocket. And this is the first time I have ever seen in real life an example of reverse trickle-down economics. Not that we could debate if trickle-down economics is real or not, but think about it. We do see the reverse happening now. Money being extracted from the lower economic brackets might just be contributing to slower economic activity that is harming economic growth.
By the way, trickle-down economics theory has been disproven mainly because the person who's supposedly the wealthy, who will then trickle it down and have their businesses and create employment. What they're doing, you know what they're doing with their money? Going on the stock exchange. That's what they do with their money. So, they invest in the stock exchange. That is what these research has shown.
So, now, I'll close with this, because we should end the show now, but I'll close with this. And this is for all politicians, right? But of course, some might associate this with the supporters of one side. But I would argue that you get this sentiment, even if the statement, even if the phrase is not used by all sides, you get this sentiment by all supporters. And that is, there was a statement one time after an election that a citizen made. And I would argue that this is the kind of statement that any political party should fight tooth and nail to disassociate itself from. And that statement, and this speaks to what Nicola said, that statement is a very simple statement that is well enough known here. It's we time now.
Of course, that is true.
I'm telling you, to what extent do diehard supporters of any political party have that, whether consciously or subconsciously, it's we time now, right? And I think this, one of the points Mr. Claxonby was trying to say is, listen, it will eventually harm you too. You just don't see it yet because you're looking short term. You're looking at short-term game. And if the UNC lost the next election and the PNM won, yes, that's what I'm saying. If the PNM won the next election, PNM supporters will be looking at short-term game because that's what we saw in the policies the last go around. Sorry, Mr. Dabney, I'm sorry, but I have to make the comparison, right? So we're not seeing any kind of long-term vision with these moves. But what we are seeing when you look at some of the details is basically it's we time now being played out. Now, you might say it's unintentional, but again, if it is unintentional, why can't you explain, why can't you give proper reasons for all of the things that are being done? And listen, one might say, Sean, how could you say that? I'm telling you, if I'm saying it, it means people thought this weeks or months ago. I have just reached the point now where I cannot help but be frustrated with my observations, and I'm looking to sound the alarm bells. And again, I'll end with this. As Karen said, we want the government to succeed. I'm pretty sure that I could speak for her on this. Certain things that we say, we would rather be wrong. We would rather be wrong, even if it means we're proven wrong. Because if we're wrong, do you know what that means? That means that things are going well. That means that things are not going wrong for the reasons why we think they are, right? And even if they're going wrong for better reasons, that's still us being better off, right? So we would rather be wrong. But unfortunately, there's very few times, if any, nothing comes to mind, where I have looked at Karen or she's looked at me and we've told each other, you know, we really were wrong on that take. It really wasn't what we thought it was. Right? Haven't happened. So, yes, what might start with Myla today might end with something else tomorrow. Because one could argue what started with CPEP, then went to forestry, then went to whatever else, right? Now it's Myla. Right? And I'll close with the point that I made earlier. Why does it seem as though the government moves are causing more people to lash out in more severe ways than I'll just say I am accustomed to? I'm not accustomed to so many acts of sabotage and so many acts of terrorism and so many threats against the government. Why? Even if you're unpopular, one could argue an unpopular government is not reason enough for all of this to happen. Yes, there was a coup against the NAR, but it's not as though they had so many different groups of people committing acts of sabotage and making threats against the government. Just saying. Just saying. All right, thanks to the callers for calling in. I don't think we have any comments today on the social media. Karen, thanks for joining me once again and bringing up this topic because she brought it up right away early this week. And I was like, yes, I love the topic because it was something I touched on, but I didn't, of course, you know, and Karen does her deep dive. It's a whole nother level and food for thought. And this is all part of everyone. You need to be more aware. That's what it takes to be engaged in a democracy. Even if your child not going to Mylat, it still matters to you. Trust me, it matters to you because eventually it will affect you. Trickle down, right? Getting 200 students to not become criminals might seem like a small thing. The criminal population in this country is a minority, you know. They have a disproportionate effect on the country. If even a quarter of these students take a wrong turn and become criminals, that's 50 more criminals. That might do a lot more damage than you think. Just saying. Karen, thanks for joining me once again.
You're welcome.
Folks, this is talking about the WESN. Just reminding you, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and teach other. All of our citizens, not just the people who vote for the same side that you vote for. And with that said, don't forget it's nice to be nice. You keep your mean comments to yourselves. Don't press send so that we could all peacefully see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. I'm Darren Jacobs, a Senior Financial Advisor with one of the largest insurers in the